holiday season in full swing here in Bundoran by the sea. I can recall a memory of a seaside holiday we had when the children were much smaller, and I can remember we'd given them each a modest budget to last the 10 days of the holiday. I suppose then attempting to teach them how to look after money, we guided and prompted, but ultimately we let them decide what to do with their money. And and the four kids made very different choices. One choosing to save as much as possible for something bigger when he got home. The youngest buying anything he could afford in sight that sparkled or looked like candy, with everything in between with the others. And especially one moment stands out, and I remember in this particularly tacky shop where the man was boasting of his famous branded speakers. I won't mention the brand name he gave, but he said they had great sound, and he started at a price of €90, which was way beyond out of budget. And I suppose we got suspicious when the rapidly descending price. Ultimately, he offered the same speakers for €15 for a finish, and then he asked them if we wanted stickers stuck on them with the branding, because obviously that was an extra because they weren't the real thing. It was quite clear that these were imitation knockoff speakers of very poor quality, which is exactly what they proved to be. To be fair, the kids were on the whole content with their choices, albeit with a few regrets, and the money ran out far too quick, as it always does, and not going very far. But life can be a lot like a holiday market full of noisy street vendors, all clamouring for our attention, all promising far more than they can actually deliver. From self-help to self-sufficiency, from celebrity gurus to Instagram influencers, it's all a lot of bluster and often very little substance. There's a wonderful invitation to a market in the writings of Isaiah, but however there are some stark contrasts with the world's fleeting wares, with the feast that God claims to offer us. There's C.S. Lewis very astutely claimed this. He says, "Our desires are not too strong, but too weak." He claims we are half-hearted creatures fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us, like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday by the sea. And he says we are far too easily pleased. Isaiah introduces the same sort of idea here, that we're far too easily pleased. To put it another way, we are conditioned to devalue what God may offer us. Or another way, that the enemy has done a remarkable job at making out God to be a killjoy instead of a generous king and father. Listen to these words from Isaiah chapter 55. They're beautiful and an amazing invitation. It says, "Come, all who are thirsty, come to the waters, and you who have no money, come buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without cost. Why spend money on what is not bread and labour on what does not satisfy?" I think deep down we are aware of our poverty of spirit. We thirst for something thirst quenching, but fail to find it so often. Most of us would concede at times that in life there must be something more than this, than what we've experienced and what we see around us. Just like my kids on holiday, their bargaining power was very low, their budget was tight. Isaiah goes a step further by saying that we have no bargaining power with God. We have no money, no currency with which to barter with God. Often we think that we have bargaining chips with God. I've done this, and therefore we expect God to do something else for us, like say a goodness, which I think we're fair to say we often overvalue, or the fact that we go to mass or church, or the good deeds that we do, or the love of our family. Isaiah says to receive what God offers, we come with nothing. We come with empty hands. Perhaps that is the hardest step, to acknowledge our bankruptcy, spiritually speaking, because it hurts our pride. And I think Isaiah cautions us not to let our pride keep us from God's feast. Isaiah also highlights a distinctly human habit, that we finding ourselves unfulfilled by what we have chosen. Meaning is like looking for meaning is like chasing the wind. It's elusive, and fulfillment is rarely captured. Perhaps the last place you would expect to find more from is God himself, yet that is what Isaiah promises. What if as a culture we have underestimated the richness of what God gives? What if we've misjudged God himself? What if only the creator of the universe is capable of bringing the fulfillment that we so desperately desire? One of my favorite songs is by a band called Plum, and called a God-shaped hole. And she talks about a God-shaped hole in all of us. Next is God's generosity. Not only does God see our need and our brokenness, but he's actually stepped up to fill that void. And his offer is open to all, no matter what their history or background. Or notice the generosity of God in this passage. He says, "Come and drink at the waters. Take your choice of water, wine or milk." The commodity is of the richest of fare. Whatever God has to offer here is unparalleled and unmatchable anywhere in the universe. Water speaks of abundance, says one of the commentators. Wine speaks of joy. Milk speaks of richness. This is no soup kitchen. There is no junk food on offer here, but a banquet or a feast fit for a king. In the next verse, he says this. Suppose he's starting to tease out what's on offer. He says, listen to me, says God, and eat what is good, and you will delight in the richest of fare. Give ear and come to me. Listen, that you may live. What is on offer? What is the most deeply satisfying and thirst-quenching reality in the cosmos is coming to God, listening to his words, and truly living. That's the implication of Isaiah's words, and it's a prophecy, because Jesus himself declared himself as the bread of life. In other words, he declared himself as the nourishment for our souls. To the Samaritan woman, he offered her living water that would quench her soul. So somehow, in spiritually ingesting the very words of God, God himself becomes the feast, and he fully satisfies. And then, I don't know if you noticed in that passage, but the economics in this passage are haywire. He says, look, come without money and buy. How can you buy if we've no money? He says it's free, yet he does talk about buying. He does talk about a cost. And that is the most remarkable thing about God's grace. It is costly, but it's given to us freely. The undeserving receive the gifts of God freely. In fairness, when we give a gift, it is free. That's what a gift is. Yet that is why God's riches and blessings transform us, because God's generosity is overwhelming. Because if we humble ourselves to receive his gifts, we find ourselves at the banquet table as undeserving sinners who have been welcomed home. Of course, Isaiah has already pointed towards the cost of all this. It was coming. It was the life and the death of Jesus that opened up the way to the banquet. Jesus has paid the price. He's paid it all. It's extreme extravagance with high stakes costs. The transaction has indeed taken place, but it's costly. But yet Jesus willingly accepted that cost because he loves you and I very, very much. And all he asks is that we own up to our need, that we come to listen to him and seek him. So the next time you see a street vendor on holiday promising the earth, or you hear all the market voices trying to get your attention, and as we reflect on the restrictions for traders and consumers that abound in these strange times we live in, remember the generosity of God, who offers so much more without any limitations, if only we will come and see. I'm your host, Matt Tuttleby of Bundoran Bible Reflections. Have a great week.